Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com. As I pass out, don't take the plea deal flyers before my speeding ticket trial, bailiff Preston tries to tell me not to. I grab my camera and begin recording as I accompany him to the clerk, who supposedly will cite the rule that people can't hand things out in court.
What's your name, sir?
It's right there.
First name?
Doesn't matter.
Yes, it does, because I've asked you for it.
I'll have you.
So what's your name, Mr. Preston?
Preston, you want to come this way for just a second?
I don't really want to come anywhere with you.
Well, sir, I'm going to have you talk to the clerk because I can't elaborate on it and she can't. So that's why I'm having you talk with her. If
Okay.
she says it's fine, she can go ahead and allow you
All right.
in.
Well, let's go then.
Very well.
All right, I'll follow you.
Please go ahead.
Since you asked nicely.
Okay.
I hope you're not making things up, Mr. Preston.
I'm just telling you what I was told
By the clerk?
by clerk and security a long time ago. So
Okay.
if it's changed or she says it's fine, then it's fine.
All right.
Brenda is supposed to be coming back around.
Yes.
The way I understand it is that, according to what I understood, they're not supposed to pass the literature out inside the courtroom. So they need to talk, check with the judge and to see if that's been waived or not. This gentleman.
What's your name? Brenda? I'm sorry. Shelley. Shuttle. I'm so sorry. Brenda Shuttle. So Mr. Preston there was telling me there's some sort of court rule against passing things out in the courtroom. Is that true?
Going in to talk to the judge.
Ah, okay. So you're not aware of any rule like that?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's up to the courts usually to decide how to handle it.
You mean the judge? It's up to the judge?
Yes, to handle the courtroom.
Thank you very much. Then I'll look forward to talking to the judge about that.
I went back into the court and passed out more flyers. The judge never said anything to me about it. Hours later, the trial.
Good to go. Excuse me, sir. Hello there.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well.
We're ready to proceed with trial.
Well, I prefer to go home and go back to work, but I'm being forced to be here against my will.
Be very careful. Whether or not you're in contempt of court, show respect to the court. That's what everybody's expected to do, and I expect you to do that. Stay prepared to go ahead.
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
All right, proceed.
First, state calls Officer Brian Vito.
I do actually, before you do that, I have a motion to file, if you don't mind. That's for you. Mr. Tenney, would it be possible to address something that you sent to me prior to the trial here today?
What is the motion that you have today? Can you
That's a motion to dismiss, but aside from that, I filed a motion.
You may argue the motion to dismiss. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I prefer that you just take that under advisement, if that's all right. It's
The motion
fairly
to dismiss
lengthy.
would be dealt with at this time. Is it?
It's fairly lengthy. There's a lot of case law in there. Basically, the argument is that
Stand up, please.
sure, that there is no jurisdiction in this.
I think you filed motions to that effect previously. Am I not mistaken?
I have. This is an extensive motion with a lot of case law attached to it.
Well, is it on the same issues that you raised before in the motions that were ruled upon already?
Not exactly.
Okay.
The other thing I had a question on was I did file a motion for the court to recognize my name change.
Let me just, one more thing on this issue. Attorney Bosley, did you want to address this motion to dismiss? Apparently, you certainly have a right to make an argument, and I understand it's just been provided to you.
I can briefly. I mean, I would just reiterate everything that was in my prior objection to the motion to dismiss. And in addition to that, I would just point out that I think it's for 96 years or 98 years, Hendrick v. Maryland has made it clear that states can institute regulation of highways. That's really the controlling case. It's Hendrick v. Maryland, 235 U.S. 610. That's a 1915 case, and that's in support of everything that I've already filed. I'll also point out that...
Well, this is a jurisdictional motion, and is that what this is?
Yes.
That motion then should be addressed prior to the hearing as it doesn't deal with the merits of the evidence that deals with jurisdictional issues. Do you want to add anything to your motion? Do you want to argue anything orally before the state finishes its response?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm looking actually to try to find his original objection that he's referring to right now. Do you recall when that was sent out, Michael?
Yes, the date that I put on there is April 25th, 2013.
Yeah, okay, I have it here. Well, I've repeatedly, and an associate of mine, Mark Stevens, has inquired of Michael here regarding the jurisdiction and how it is that these statutes came to apply to me in the first place. Michael has never responded to those inquiries, and I think that question still stands before the court today.
Well, that issue's been ruled upon previously, so I disagree with that. That issue is exactly what you presented in prior pleadings, and those pleadings have already been ruled upon. Once something's ruled upon, unless the decision's appealed, it stands, and we're not going to continue to revisit the same issue.
So could you explain to me how the statutes factually came to apply to me?
I issued the order.
All the order said was denied.
Yeah.
So you're going to give no explanation?
I denied the motion.
Right. So the other issue I had here was the name change issue that I put in, asking the court to recognize that I've changed my name to Ian Freeman. You said in your denial that it was improperly pled, I believe. And I'm wondering if you can give me more information about what the court was referring to with that.
Have you formally changed your name?
Yes, in New Hampshire, according to Moskowitz versus Moskowitz, one can change one's name simply by effecting the use of a new name, so long as it's not for, and I cited this in my motion, so long as it's not for the purpose of fraud, and I've been using this name for several years. I have a New Hampshire voter registration card.
Well, to answer your question on that, there's a legal statutory process for change of name, and you did not provide proof that you...
It's not obligation. It's not
Let me finish.
obligatory.
You have not provided proof that you've complied with that provision. That was the basis of the decision.
According to...
Let me make something clear. I made a ruling on it, and now I've explained to you further what the ruling is, and I believe I explained that in the order, though I don't recollect it totally. But I've explained to you that there's a statutory procedure regarding a name change. I don't believe you provided proof that you followed that procedure, and I believe that procedure, the statutory procedure, is controlling in this issue. So that's the ruling.
Is that, just to clarify a question, does that have to do, that procedure, is that the only procedure this court recognizes? Because I did cite a New Hampshire Supreme Court case that addresses that issue.
As I said, I've made the rulings on motions, and we're not going to then revisit things that have already been decided today. These are motions that you filed prior to the hearing, and I made decisions on those. You have a right to appeal decisions with regard to things that if you haven't properly done so, then we're not going to be revisiting them here. I'm not going to be the appeals court on my own case, on my own decisions. I made the decision. You have a proper venue and a proper opportunity to challenge any decision the court makes, and if you don't avail yourself of that, that's your decision. Those decisions have been made, so therefore we're not going to spend time in our trial today revisiting things that have already been decided upon by the court.
Well, can I ask you for the courtesy of referring to me by Mr. Freeman or Ian Freeman today?
If you preferred me to refer you that way, fine. I'm just not going to legally recognize a name change that I don't believe has been legally established. That's what I'm saying. That's what you asked me to do in the motion. If you preferred me to call you anything today because that's how you prefer to be called, that's fine. That's a different issue. And I want to be happy to call you Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, that's all I have. You may proceed.
Again, Your Honor, the state calls Officer Riepel for this. Raise your right hand, please. You swear the testimony about giving the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please take your seat. And would you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Sure. Brian Riepel, R-E-O-P-E-L.
And are you a certified officer?
I am.
And where did you receive your certification?
I went to the New Hampshire Police Academy in 2004 in Concord.
Okay. And as part of that academy, are you trained in traffic enforcement?
I am.
Okay. And were you on duty on March 22nd, 2013?
I was.
And by whom were you employed on that day?
Town of Antrim.
Okay. And in what capacity?
Patrolling.
Okay. And at approximately 7:56 that day in the morning, where were you?
I was on Keene Road, which is also known as New Hampshire, Route 9, conducting stationary radar patrol.
All right, I asked the court to take judicial notice that Keene Road is a way.
So,
Okay. And you indicated that you were conducting
Stationary radar.
stationary radar. Okay. And the unit in that car that you were using that day, is that one that you're familiar with?
Yes.
And were you trained in that?
Yes.
unit? And did you have other experience in that unit?
Yes,
And do you know if that unit was operating properly that day?
it was.
Okay. And how do you know that?
We checked the internal calibration. We also checked the antenna with tuning forks to make sure that it's properly working.
Okay. And you did that day?
I did.
Okay. And so at that location then, while conducting radar, was there anything that caught your attention?
Yes, there was a vehicle on the road heading towards the Hillsborough town line at a high rate of speed. The speed limit on that section of the roadway is 50 miles an hour. Prior to that, it's 45. You're going from a 45 to a 50 zone. I clocked that vehicle at 66 miles an hour.
Okay. And you indicated it's posted 50 in that location.
Correct.
Is it clearly posted?
Yes.
And nothing's obstructing the sign?
No.
Okay. And so based on that observation, and when you say you got a reading of 66, is there anything else that happens when you get a reading of audible tones or things like that?
Yes, you'll hear a clear audible tone on the actual radar instrument to show that it's locked onto the target. You can visually look at the vehicle, and it may also make a visual observation of the vehicle speed, so that way you can compare it to the radar to make sure that it's functioning normally.
Okay. And was your visual observation consistent with what you saw on the radar?
Yes.
Okay. And so based on that, what did you do next?
I pulled out of where I was sitting, and I stopped the vehicle on Route 9 just over the Hillsborough line.
Okay. And were you able to make contact with that operator?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to identify that operator?
Yes, the operator handed me a Florida driver's license.
Okay. And what was the name on that license?
Ian Bernard.
And do you see that person here in the courtroom today?
He's in the red shirt at the defense table.
Okay. All right. Ask the record to reflect that the officers identified Mr. Freeman, who waved as he made that.
record certified.
And did you have a conversation with him at that time?
Yes, it was a brief conversation. He let me know that I was being recorded and stopped. I said that was fine. The reason for stop obviously was for speed. I checked his registration certificate that he gave me and his driver's license. Both of them were valid. After learning that, I issued hit me a ticket for the speed.
Okay. And one other question: when you made the visual observation and you got that reading on the radar, were there any other cars in close proximity to his?
The time of the stop, I would say the traffic was about medium. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light.
Okay. And do you have any question as to which vehicle you tracked in terms of its speed?
No, the vehicle that I saw that I ascertained for the visual estimate of speed on the radar was actually, he was driving what I appear to believe was a used police vehicle. It still had faded police markings on the side of it. It was a black and white paint scheme, so it was easily identifiable to me.
And, okay, very good. No other questions?
All right, main question.
May I call you Brian?
Sure.
Brian, are you being paid to be here today?
Currently not.
Oh, okay. He mentioned who were you working for at that time. Are you still working for the town of Antrim? What are you doing these days?
I am in the United States Air Force.
Oh, okay. So, do you know that in this case, would there be a cause of action against me if I was not within the state?
What were you referring to?
Just object to relevance. Whether,
This goes to jurisdiction.
All right, so you want to question this witness with regard to your motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction?
What's that now?
You want to question this witness with regard to your motion on factual issues regarding your motion to dismiss?
Well, no, I'm presuming he thinks that he had jurisdiction to do the things that he did, and I'd like to know.
Well, that's up to me to determine if he did or didn't. You've raised an issue, and I'd have to decide that issue. So I'll have to rule on your motion. It's not if the witness is here to testify with regard to facts. You can question in regard to facts and not his interpretation of law. It's irrelevant what his interpretation of law is. It's relevant for what the court's interpretation of the law is as far as jurisdiction. Go ahead.
Is it your testimony that I was within the state at the time of this incident?
objection to relevance?
That's a factual question. I'll allow him to answer that.
When I saw the vehicle speeding, that I had stopped, when I got that reading, that vehicle was in the town of Antrim, which is in the state of Hampshire.
Now, can you tell me factually what is the state?
Same objection.
Sustained.
Can you tell me factually what is a statute?
Again, same objection. Objection as to relevance. I think that's for the purview of the court.
He doesn't have to quote the statute. The witness can just testify as to what he...
Well, I don't mean the exact, I don't mean to quote the statute, sorry to interrupt. I mean, what is a statute factually? Can you define it? I mean, if it's your job to enforce statutes, you should know what they are, right? So can you tell me factually what a statute is?
Objection as to relevance. And again, I think that falls under the court's purview.
Sustained.
Who is the victim in this case?
Objection as to relevance.
Well, all criminal proceedings should have a victim involved, so I'd like to know who that is.
Objection sustained.
Who's the complaining party?
The complaining party, as in who signed the complaint,
Mm-hmm.
that would be myself.
Are you alleging that I violated someone's rights?
Objection as to relevance has nothing to do with whether the defendant was speeding on Keene Road on that day.
What is the question again?
Are you alleging that I have violated someone's rights?
Objection sustained.
Are you alleging that I've harmed anyone?
Objection as to relevance.
Statute that he's charged you under is a speeding statute. And the questions that you're asking are relevant to the elements that were required to prove by the state to gain a conviction on that offense. So the state's objecting on the grounds of relevance, and the court sustains that.
So would you say this is a victimless crime?
Objection as to relevance.
This witness, Mr. Freeman, is not make the laws. Instead, he simply is charged with enforcing them. So you're asking for an interpretation or a policy argument with regard to purpose, or whatever, of the statute, and that's irrelevant to the facts. Certainly not outside the purview of this witness. It's not relevant to the court with this witness's opinion about whether this is or isn't a victimless crime. For that reason, I'll sustain the objection.
What you observed in this incident, would you say that there was any person or property that was placed in danger?
Same objection, that would be relevant to a reckless driving or negligent driving. That's not in charge.
This particular statute requires a state to prove that the defendant, Mr. Freeman, yourself, was traveling at a speed that was unreasonable for the conditions then they're existing. It does not require the state to prove that anybody was placed at harm. As the prosecutor indicated, it's not a negligent driving or a reckless operation.
So there's no allegation that anyone was put in danger here?
Not as part of this complaint.
In which case, I'd like to motion to place this on file pursuant to RSA 262:42.
Describe. Make your point further.
That RSA says that as long as there was no person or property placed in danger, the court may place this issue on file.
That might be an appropriate request to make at the conclusion, but at this point we're gathering evidence in your question.
Okay.
Do you have any more questions for the
Yes, I do. Stand by. Okay. Now, Brian, would you knowingly file a ticket that was not consistent with the New Hampshire Constitution?
Objection as to relevance.
You can answer.
Wait, can you repeat that again so I understand?
It's a yes or no question. Would you knowingly file a ticket that was not consistent with the New Hampshire Constitution?
I wouldn't file a ticket which I didn't believe that the person I'm issuing a ticket to didn't commit that offense.
That wasn't a responsive answer to the question. The question was, would you knowingly file a ticket that was not consistent with the New Hampshire Constitution? So yes or no?
No.
Okay. Is the ticket in this case consistent with the New Hampshire Constitution?
It's consistent with what they issue us based on the legislative laws that are enforced. I don't make the laws. I just enforce what the legislature hands down.
Also not a responsive answer. I'm just looking for a yes or a no. So is the ticket consistent with the New Hampshire Constitution?
Objection as to relevance.
You're asking the witness to, again, the witness is not the court. You've asked the court already to deal with the jurisdictional issue about the authority of the court to proceed with this matter, and that's an appropriate issue to raise with the court, not with this witness. This is a fact witness. It's not up to him to interpret the laws. I mean to interpret the Constitution. He's brought a charge based upon a statute, and that's the responsibility of the police officer.
Objection.
So I'm not going to allow, just so we don't have to continue to have the same objections, I'm not going to allow you to ask this witness, or I'll sustain any objection where you ask him to make a legal conclusion.
I understand where you're coming from on that, but as a law enforcement officer, isn't it his job to interpret isn't it his job to interpret the Constitution? Like, for instance, if he was asked to do something that he considered unconstitutional, wouldn't he be able to say no?
Well, we're not in a constitutional law class here, so I'm not going to engage in a philosophical or legal debate with you about these issues.
So I'm not looking to debate.
You're questioning this witness. If the class question was not relevant because you're asking the witness to draw legal conclusions which are in the purview of the court. So that's all I'm going to engage in with you. I'm not going to engage in a discussion here on the record. We're here to try your case on speeding. This particular witness has made factual testimony, and if you want to question him about that, fine. If you're going to continue to ask him questions, asking him to generate legal opinions about this case, I'm going to continue to have to sustain those objections if the objections are made.
Did you swear an oath to the New Hampshire Constitution?
In reference to what?
When you became a police officer, did you swear an oath? to the Constitution?
I guess I'm going to object on relevance. It has nothing to do with his knowledge of.
What's the relevance?
Relevance to, whether or not he's a sworn police officer.
Well, if you're asking
Or was
about
it
his
not?
qualifications or his background, you can inquire about that.
Well, it's my understanding that a police officer in New Hampshire has to swear an oath to uphold both the U.S. and New Hampshire constitutions. Did you do that when you became an officer?
When I was hired in Hillsborough and Antrim, I was sworn in by the departments.
And you swore an oath to the New Hampshire
I don't
Constitution?
remember exactly what the
Don't remember.
said, but I was sworn in.
Do you recall ever reading the New Hampshire Constitution?
Objection. Irrelevant.
Sustained.
Okay. So I've got the Bill of Rights here, the New Hampshire Constitution. If I may approach the witness, have him read the first two articles.
I would object on relevance again.
I think the Constitution is entirely
One
relevant.
second. I'm sure he's- but
Whether having the officer read the Constitution has, again, nothing to do with whether or not the defendant was driving his vehicle at a rate above the speed limit on Keene Road on the day alleged. And again, anything that constitutionality is another term for jurisdiction. And again, that issue's been decided.
objection sustained.
Well, for the record, I'd just like to go ahead and read the first and second articles of the New Hampshire Constitution into the record.
Well, if you want to excuse the witness, and if you want to make a closing argument in the case.
I'll put that off then, in that case. I have some more questions for Brian. Brian, what was the weather like that morning? You said it was late March, correct?
That was the date of the complaint.
Yeah. Do you recall the weather?
I don't recall any adverse conditions.
Okay. And you said there weren't too many cars on the road?
Yeah, I testified that there was about a medium traffic light at
Was there-
about that time.
Was there anyone immediately behind my vehicle?
I can't recall.
Was there any car in front of my car?
Like I said, I can't recall.
Would you say that, based on your observation, that I was driving dangerously for those conditions?
Yes, I would think it was unreasonable and prudent for roadway.
Was it dangerous?
It depends on what you decide dangerous means.
I'm asking you.
I don't know what your
I'm going to
definition
object
of
because whether it was
dangerous
dangerous or not is irrelevant.
It is for the statute that you've been charged under, Mr. Freeman. There is no requirement that the state prove that your conduct was dangerous. Therefore, it's not relevant to the issues before the court.
Brian, how fast did you have to drive to catch up to me?
I didn't even look at that. I have no idea.
Do you have a copy of the calibration certificate for the radar unit that you used?
Not personally on me.
Is there one available?
There's, I don't know.
He's asking a witness a question, the witness says he doesn't know, so
Doesn't
now
know.
he's asking you, I think that's a legitimate question.
Yeah, and I
Prosecution, do you
guess
have
I'm not in a position, or a location that I'm answering questions of the defendant, so I guess I'll just wait till his next question.
So the question, the answer to that question is no, he doesn't have, the witness does not have it with him.
Okay. Does your radar unit, or did your radar unit have a control that allows you to lock in a targeted vehicle's speed on the readout?
You could. Yes.
Did you show your unit's speed to me when you stopped me?
No.
Is there a reason why you didn't?
Objection. It's irrelevant. The officer's not required to show speed to anybody.
Although it's correct that that's not a requirement, I think the witness can answer the question if he is able to.
I never do that because when you lock it in, that speed gets locked into the visual screen. I like to keep it open so I can get the tracking history, so that way I know I have the proper target that the radar logged onto. So I don't do that because then it wouldn't allow me to get the proper tracking history to make sure it was your vehicle that I am seeing.
Can you briefly describe to the court how it is that speed determining radar works?
Objection. This case law is clear that officers are not required to testify. They're not engineers. They're not expert witnesses, and that's beyond the scope of what they're
Objection sustained.
Is it true, you did mention calibration earlier, is it true that delicate and sensitive electronic measurement instruments such as radar units must be calibrated often to make sure they're accurate?
I know that we calibrate the radar at least once a year, and then that we check it with the tuning forks.
And you said you did that morning or that day?
I did check it, yes, with tuning forks.
So can you describe the process of the tuning fork check?
Sure. What we do on the antenna, we would obviously check the instrument itself, make sure it's working properly, and then by the use of the tuning forks, we would check the moving mode and also the stationary mode to make sure that it displays consistent with what the tuning forks are. And that's how we check to make sure that the antenna is working as it communicates with the actual instrument box.
Is there a specific speed that a tuning fork is certified for?
Yeah, it depends on what kind of tuning forks you have, but there is a speed that's on the tuning fork, and what you would do, like for example, the tuning fork was a 35-mile tuning fork in stationary mode. When you would test the antenna, that would be the speed that would show up on the instrument box.
Do you recall which tuning fork, what the speed was of the tuning fork that you used?
Yes, it was, it's 55 and 30, sorry, are the two tuning forks.
Okay. And do you know when the tuning fork itself was last calibrated by an independent testing facility?
Objection. That falls under State v. Ahern. An officer is not required to provide that testimony.
Sustained.
Did the tuning fork in this case have a certificate of accuracy that you had been aware of?
Yeah, usually when the company we use comes out, they take the instrument and the tuning forks together and do the certification together.
Had your radar unit ever malfunctioned in any way?
Not that I'm aware of.
So it's never been repaired as far as you know?
As far as I know, no.
Okay. And you said that maintenance on it was about once a year?
Yes, that's not when we do it.
What's the maximum range of the radar unit?
I don't know in feet how far out the maximum is, off the top of my head.
Would you say hundreds of feet or over 1,000?
Like I said, I don't know what the max range is.
Do you know what the beam width of the radar unit is in degrees?
No.
Have you ever obtained what turned out to be a false speed reading by incorrectly aiming a radar unit, for example, at another vehicle or a tree blown by the wind?
I have no idea.
Is it true that if there's another surface that's in motion, that it could, in theory, cause a false reading on the radar unit?
That would be for moving mode. I got you in stationary mode.
Well, even in stationary mode, if you were to shoot a tree that was blowing in the wind, would that also cause a false reading?
Objection asked and answered. He said, previous similar question, he didn't know.
Both ruled, you can just answer as best you can.
Sir, can you repeat the question so I understand?
Yes. So, is it true that wind-blown tree limbs or leaves could sometimes reflect radar signals to generate a false reading?
I have never seen that in my career.
Do you know what a harmonic frequency is?
Objection. Again, it goes to scientific evidence that the officer is not required to testify to. State v. Ahern.
Sustained.
Did you know that electrical interference from power lines or transformers or even high voltage neon lights can generate false radar readings?
Same objection.
Sustained.
When was the training you received regarding the use of the radar unit?
There's a class that's held in the academy that obviously I went to, and also during my field training program at Hillsborough for the 12 weeks I had. I'm trained by a senior officer and how to apply, honestly, what I learned in the academy to the real world situation.
How long did the training on the radar unit last?
We're always using it when we're on patrol, so I mean, it was a 12-week program, so we're always using it.
Mm-hmm. But the training itself, that portion?
It's consistent. Every day I get a review of what I do that day. That includes any electronics I use, whether it's a radar, in-car computer, whatever. It's always something that's constantly looked at by the field training officer.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have for you, Brian. Thank you.
Mark, do you have any other questions for him?
Just one. When you first locked on to Mr. Ian's vehicle, how far away was it approximately?
He had come around a corner, so it wasn't very far. I would say the distance probably a quarter mile at most.
You made reference to not locking in a speed because you tracked that vehicle to confirm that's the right vehicle.
Yeah.
And how long did you track that vehicle?
He was a little bit away from me, so I mean I was tracking him probably 5 seconds or more just to verify that was a strong signal, that's the signal I received.
And so how close do you think he got to you during that tracking process?
I tracked him from when I initially saw him when he came around. I had come around the corner all the way till he passed me. So the cone will always track as long as I don't keep it locked in until the signal leaves the cone. So once he passed me, that's when the rear cone wouldn't pick him up.
So when he passed you, how close was he?
I was on the side of the road, so I mean we were probably no more than 10 feet apart.
Good.
You know.
Yeah.
Great. Yes.
Brother.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Step down. Does the state have any other witnesses?
Does not stay rest.
All right, Mr. Freeman, do you want to testify?
No, I don't. But I did want to go ahead and re-motion to place this on file pursuant to RSA 262:42, which says that if no person or property was endangered, that the court is able to place this matter on file.
Okay, well, the court certainly does have various sentencing options. That's certainly something the court can do in this or any case. The state want to address that at all?
I can address that issue, yeah. I guess just in terms of treating similarly situated individuals the same, Mr. Freeman does have a misuse of plates in 2009, unregistered vehicle in 2000. Misuse of plates in 2010, unregistered vehicle in 2010. So where that might be an option if someone had a perfectly clean record, I don't think it would be consistent with our typical sentencing, so I would check on that basis.
Well, it's still an option. It's always the option. The court has all sentencing options available until we don't have sentencing guidelines for these speeding cases. So I don't believe I'm going to issue that order and place it on file for the reasons of the prior moving violations that we've had. I would usually issue such an order to place a matter on file with or without a finding where there's no prior record. So your request to do that is denied, sir. Do you have any other closing argument? Because you go first before the state. Did you want
I do. Stand by, please. I'd also like to motion for a directed verdict of not guilty in this case, as the state has failed to prove jurisdiction.
Okay, state want to respond, or do you stand on your prior response?
The court's already ruled on jurisdiction. I think that issue's moved, so I object.
Well, the issues that you raised regarding jurisdiction, you did file a motion to dismiss today. Based on your description of your motion, it's the same motion that you filed essentially prior to the hearing.
It's not the same. It's very
Well,
much more
explain to me
detailed.
how it's different then.
It's very detailed with extensive case law.
Well, providing additional support for the motion does not make it a new motion, or would make it a new motion if it's a new issue that you raise. you raise a different issue than you raised in your prior motion to dismiss on jurisdictional grounds. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is I'll repeat that, Mr. Freeman. I want to make sure you understand what my ruling is on that. If you were filing a motion to reconsider a prior ruling, you can say that the court has failed to misapprehend the law, that's misapprehended the law and has misapplied the law, and you can cite additional case law to support that if it was a motion to reconsider. This is actually a new motion that you filed. I ruled on the prior motion. I don't believe there was any motion to reconsider, so I don't recall.
Well, I'd be happy to adjust that.
What I'm saying is it's too late to file a motion to reconsider now. If you're filing a new motion, I need to understand what's different other than citation of new case law. Is there a different issue being raised in this motion that you just filed today? Certainly the court has not had an opportunity to digest it completely, so I'm relying upon your oral argument with regard to the motion which you can proceed with. You filed this on the day of trial. So I'm asking you to explain to me, if you can, what different issue you're raising in this motion and in the prior motion the court's already ruled on.
Well, let me take a look at the old motion, if you don't mind. Yeah, so the prior motion, the primary thrust of it had to do that there was no evidence that I'm present within a state. This motion to dismiss doesn't rely on that at all. It comes at it from a different perspective. It looks at definitions of vehicle and travel and these sorts of things.
All right, the state want to respond to that. You've been able to look through this motion. Do you believe that you agree with Mr. Freeman that it raises issues that weren't raised in the initial prior pleading?
Well, at the end, it all still boils down to jurisdiction. It's really the same argument.
Well, I think if it's a different argument regarding jurisdiction, then it's a different issue. Attorney Busseley, I mean, there could be more than one issue raised with regard to jurisdiction. I'm not saying that you can't raise jurisdictional issues on other grounds. You can't simply do it on the same ground with due case law. That was my ruling.
Right, the basic claim in this case is that there's all this case law that says that people have a right to travel, and that's nothing to do with
that's my recollection of your prior motion.
No, that's
okay.
not it.
Well,
and I'll just say, I mean, I've seen and reviewed similar extensive motions, and it's really a play on words, semantics, traveler versus driver or operator, different ways of calling a vehicle something else, such that, well, we're not really talking about a vehicle here. In the end, and then a lot of the case law that I've seen in the past, I haven't looked at this one, relies on cases that don't necessarily apply, talking about ordinances from Chicago in the 1800s. There's a lot of things that just don't trump, certainly Hendrick v. Maryland, the case I cited, and its progeny. So
I object to that. It's not a play on words to talk about what legal definitions are. And words, as you know, in courts are legalese, and they are defined very specifically, and these words mean things. So that's what part of this motion outlines.
right, well, do you want to argue this motion that you filed today orally in addition to what you've already
I'd prefer not to. It's fairly lengthy. I prefer the court just take it under advisement.
perhaps will do so. I'll render a decision in the case.
I would like to add the two articles that I mentioned previously into the record, if that's all right.
To what?
The articles, Article 1 and 2 from the New Hampshire Constitution's Bill of Rights. I'd just like to read that into the record. Article 1.
Well, Mr. Freeman, you don't need to read it into the record. I mean, if you want me to take judicial notice as it relates to somehow the facts in this case of aspects of the New Hampshire Constitution, or provisions, I should say, of the New Hampshire Constitution, I'll consider that if that's what you're asking me to do.
They're fairly brief, if you don't mind. I would just like to read them into the record and make a quick point about that.
Does the state have any objection to that?
maybe you could just give us a sentence or two as to why it's relevant to the case at hand.
Sure. I'd like to read them into the record.
Could you do that, communicate what the relevance is? I mean, I'm concerned with, in any case, with what's in the record. And if somebody raises an objection to something being placed in evidence or in the record, orally or otherwise, on grounds of relevance, I have to know what the relevance is. So
Has he objected? I didn't hear the word
he
objection.
does. He objects to it on grounds of relevance.
Well, I think
the state and I want you to make an offer as to what the relevance is, and then depending on my ruling on the relevance objection, we'll see if we can read it into the record.
Well, I think the Constitution should be relevant to all court hearings, given that it's ostensibly the set of rules that this court is operating underneath.
We have a lot of rules. We have case law, we have statutory law, we have court rules, we have the New Hampshire Constitution, United States Constitution. I'm aware of all of them. And we obviously apply those in every case. Doesn't mean we read every statute into the record, doesn't mean we need to read every case law. If it pertains to a particular issue in the case and it's part of your argument. So I'm asking you, how does it relate to your defense in this case?
It's hard to answer that question without actually being able to read it into the record first. But the Article 1 and 2 have to do with the rights of humans. And, as I pointed out in this motion to dismiss, humans have a right to travel. And therefore, if it's not alleged that I was traveling, putting anyone in danger, and no one has alleged that today, then the state really has no business interfering with that. So I just want to share these on the record. Article 1 is all men are born.
I'm going to overrule the objection, not because it doesn't have merit, because I don't see that there's any harm to that. And Mr. Freeman wishes that to be in the record, and I don't see where, at this point, there's going to be any prejudice to the state's case by doing so.
So, very brief here. Articles 1 and 2 from the New Hampshire Constitution's Bill of Rights. All men are born equally free and independent. Therefore, all government of right originates from the people, is founded in consent, and instituted for the general good. Article 2. All men have certain natural, essential, and inherent rights, among which are the enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and in a word, of seeking and obtaining happiness. So in this case, the state has no consent from me as a human being, supposedly on the same level as all of the other men and women in this room, to do what they've done. I've never put anybody in danger. No one has alleged that I have. And I'm sorry that the court has had its time wasted on this matter, because it should have been dismissed by the state from the get-go. So I think that's all I have for that.
All right. Does Greg have any closing argument to make?
I would just say that the state has proven its case consistent with State v. Caswell, 146, New Hampshire 243, and State v. Hearn, 122, New Hampshire 744. And we would just ask the court impose the statutory fine.
All right, so where we leave this is the court has heard all the evidence that's been submitted in the case. We'll take the case under advisement and make a written decision or finding with regard to guilty or not guilty on the underlying charge. Also, as a part of that, or as a prelude to that, review the motion to dismiss. Because this was filed today, have you seen it previously, though, before it was filed?
I have not.
How much time do you need to respond to? I understand you object to the motion. If you want to make a written response, so you can. I'm not going to require that. You stated your objection on the record to that.
I would just object with the one case that I previously provided. That's Hendrick v. Maryland and its progeny. I would cite it's 235 U.S. 610, 1915. And just for the court's information, it says, in the absence of national legislation covering the subject, a state may rightfully prescribe uniform regulations necessary for public safety in order in respect to the operation of its highways and of all motor vehicles, those moving in interstate commerce as well as others. And so, constitutional issue and the right of states to impose reasonable regulation has been established since 1915. That's my response.
Good. I'll take the matter under advisement. Thank you.
I know.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.